Our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective. So the only way he figures that he's going to get reelected, and as sure as you're sitting there, is to start a war with Iran.
I mean, talk about projection, but more interestingly, Lindsey Graham.
There's a question that has followed almost every major military decision in modern politics. It's a simple question, but it's also the one that tends to expose the most uncertainty. What exactly is the plan from here? Welcome to the Public Cross-Examine, where we take a step back from the noise and examine political claims carefully and in context. If you value calm, evidence-led analysis rather than shouting matches, consider subscribing. It genuinely helps the channel grow. In this exchange on LBC, British journalist James O'Brien speaks with Washington correspondent Simon Marks about reports that the United States has entered a military confrontation with Iran alongside Israel. The discussion raises several immediate questions about how the situation unfolded, how the decision was communicated to the public, and how long the conflict could potentially last. But the political tension running through the entire conversation is something else. For years, a central theme within Donald Trump's political coalition, particularly the America First wing of his support base, has been the argument that the United States should avoid becoming entangled in overseas conflicts. That's why this moment is attracting so much scrutiny, because once military action begins, the debate very quickly moves beyond the initial justification and towards something that history has shown to be much harder to answer. Not just why the conflict started, but how it is supposed to end. And as you listen to this exchange, you'll hear that question surface again and again.
Suppose we should begin with the appetite among the American people for what Donald Trump has done over the weekend.
Well, I think we should be absolutely clear, James. Donald Trump has not prepared the American public for this war in any way. I mean, they only saw him twice over the weekend, and they had to be up at 2:30 in the morning on Saturday if they wanted to see him the first time, or find it suddenly when they woke up on Saturday morning to be rather surprised by the fact that the country was going to war in conjunction with Israel against Iran. So in that first overnight message, Donald Trump talked about major combat operations being underway against Iran, made completely contradictory remarks instructing the Iranian people on the one hand to rise up and take power into their own hands, and the time for action is now, except of course he then told them that the time for action was not now, because he told them they needed to stay indoors because it was too dangerous to go outside because bombs were raining down on them. Then we didn't see anything of him until last night when he was departing Mar-a-Lago and heading back to Washington, D.C. He did engage in a handful of individual telephone conversations with hand-picked reporters here in Washington during the course of the day, in which again he offered completely contradictory storylines regarding the purpose, duration, intent of this war, and gave no indication that he's got any plan for the day after. I mean, he didn't even have a plan for the day of, much less the day after. But then last night, before he left Mar-a-Lago, he did appear on camera in a pre-recorded series of comments, and first of all broke the news to the American people that they had already heard from US Central Command that the first American fatalities had taken place in the theater. Let's listen to that.
Earlier today, CENTCOM shared the news that 3 U.S. military service members have been killed in action. As one nation, we grieve for the true American patriots who have made the ultimate sacrifice.
Then he told the American people that while he can't say how long this war is going to last, and in comments to a reporter he said it might go on for a month or longer, they need to brace themselves for more American fatalities.
And sadly, there will likely be more. Before it ends, that's the way it is. Likely be more, but we'll do everything possible. where that won't be the case.
That's the way it is. And the president went on to insist that his war in Iran is right and justified.
These actions are right and they are necessary to ensure that Americans will never have to face a radical, bloodthirsty terrorist regime armed with nuclear weapons and lots of threats.
And that was it in terms of comments last night. He arrived back at the White House, walked into the building, didn't say anything to reporters. As we now know, he's given that unbelievable interview. I mean, except it's not unbelievable. We should be pricing all of this in now to the Daily Telegraph, once again flaying the Prime Minister, flaying the UK, even as British service personnel are putting their lives on the line for his war of choice in Iran. But he is facing incoming here in the United States, and it's coming, James, from his own core MAGA supporters, America First adherents, who are overwhelmingly telling him that they not only have no appetite for this war, but they believe that this is a U-turn, a massive U-turn by an American president they elected to disentangle America's military from forever wars and far-off entanglements in the Middle East about which the American public know very little. But this is a president who's just done nothing to condition the environment here to support this. And now we're seeing, I think, 3 US fighter jets that may have been brought down in Kuwait by friendly fire. There's no evidence here that the American public has the appetite for any of this, much less for a conflict that could last for a month.
So here's the $64,000 question then. Why do you think he's done it?
Well, I mean, as you and I have discussed, within the last week and weeks prior to that, this is a man in need of distraction, in urgent need of distraction. I mean, he's got fresh questions about the Epstein files besieging the White House. He's got the Supreme Court incinerating the tariffs that lie as the key pillar, not just of his trade, but also of his foreign and national security policies. He's got record low numbers in the approval ratings, and he's got an Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia saying, come on, mate, we've got to do this, let's give it a go. And it may well be that the Israelis outplayed him by launching the first airstrike and essentially forcing his hand. I mean, if you listen to what Omani negotiators who had been shuttling between the US and Iranian delegations in Geneva up until only Thursday of last week say, they indicate that the Iranians had given significant ground and that a possible compromise existed for negotiators, as they said they were doing, to take back to their respective capitals over the weekend to try and advance. But then whether it was the Israelis simply saying, right, we're going in right now and we're killing the supreme leader because we've got the opportunity, Donald Trump being cajoled into joining that or enthusiastically joining it, seeing that he had an opportunity here to play geopolitical 52-card pickup and hope without any kind of a plan that maybe the brute force of the American military and the Israeli militaries might deliver him a better situation that he's been in previously in Iran. I mean, I think it's for all of those many reasons that he decided to give this a go.
What then would, given, as you've established, that the justification for it is at the very least paper thin, the support for it is almost non-existent, what would success look like from his point of view?
Well, I think it's also important to underscore, James, that the legality in America is skating on the thinnest possible ice. There is a law. It was enacted in 1981 by President Ronald Reagan that says American elected officials must not engage in the assassination of foreign heads of state or other foreign government officials. And there's no way of looking at what happened on Saturday in Iran and saying that the United States wasn't either directly involved or clearly playing a significant supporting role in orchestrating the assassination of the supreme leader, for whom, of course, we in the West have absolutely no sympathy, given his track record of brutality inside Iran and Iran's track record of terrorism and nefarious acts on the world stage as well. But on the face of it, that action clearly was a breach of American law, and there's no justification that the Americans are putting forward for any of this under international law, in the same way as they ran roughshod over international law with the attack on Venezuela back in January. What does success look for him? I mean, in his description, a Pollyanna world in which the Iranian people, the families of demonstrators whose loved ones were cut down in their tens of thousands by Iran's Revolutionary Guard only within the last few weeks, those people go out onto the streets, put flowers into the rifles of the Revolutionary Guards, engage in a chorus of Kumbaya and say, let's all get together. Us, the security forces, the Revolutionary Guard, the army, will get together and will form a new government. I mean, that's the plan. And it's clearly not workable.
No, I mean, I feel like Donald Rumsfeld contemplating known unknowns and unknown unknowns and known knowns. But I mean, that question, as you will know, General David Petraeus posed it back in 2003 in Baghdad. Tell me how this ends. I'm going to play you a clip. Actually, I'm going to play you two. The first one you will be very familiar with, but I presume, and you can tell me afterwards, that this is going to be what's troubling the base.
Our president will start a war with Iran because he has absolutely no ability to negotiate. He's weak and he's ineffective. So the only way he figures that he's going to get reelected, and as sure as you're sitting there, is to start a war with Iran.
I mean, talk about projection. But more interestingly, Lindsey Graham, the South Carolina senator, who is one of the most, how could we put it, enthusiastic cheerleaders of Donald Trump, was asked a really I know you'll have heard this, but my listeners haven't heard it yet.
Moving forward, in a social media post Sunday, President Trump wrote this, quote, hopefully the IRGC and police will peacefully merge with the Iranian patriots and work together as a unit to bring back the country to the greatness it deserves. Is hope the plan for the future of Iran?
No, the future of Iran is going to be determined by the Iranian people. The new Iran, whatever it is, whether it's a cleric or a representative democracy, our goal is to make sure it cannot become, again, the largest state sponsor of terrorism. That's a win for us.
But is there a plan to make sure that happens, Senator? Is there a plan? Does the president have a plan to guarantee that that happens?
No, it's not his job or my job to do this. How many times do I have to tell you? Our job is to make sure Iran is no longer the largest state sponsor of terrorism, to help the people reconstruct a new government, no boots on the ground. We don't own, you know this idea, you break it, you own it? I don't buy that one bit. It's in America's interest to make sure the Ayatollah is dead. He's dead.
Whose job is it to have a plan?
I mean, what he's saying there is our job is to scream fire in a crowded theatre.
Yeah.
And it's up to the theatre goers and the actors and maybe a little bit of theatre management then to figure out what to do about it. But we've done our job. We've screamed fire in a crowded theatre, and now we'll see where everything ends up. I mean, Lindsey Graham is increasingly a pastiche of himself. But, I mean, no sense of history. That reference to you break it, you own it, which, of course, is a rule that existed in a popular home furnishings shop here in the United States that was cited by Colin Powell when George W. Bush was considering invading Iraq in 2003. It was an admonition to President George W. Bush. You've got to remember, you break it, you own it. That's not an option. I mean, that is an inviolable rule
incredible,
here
actually.
that they're completely disregarding. In the same way, by the way, as the president in that interview with the Telegraph, when he says on Starmer's refusal to allow British bases to be used for strikes against Iran, he says that's probably never happened between our countries before. It sounds like he was worried about the legality. Well, do you remember when Barack Obama was thinking of going to war in Syria and the British Parliament didn't back it, and that then forced Barack Obama to abandon his plans to go to war against Bashar al-Assad in Syria? They have no sense of historical memory whatsoever, nor an understanding, in the case of the president, about the legal complexities here. The British government was reportedly pulling intelligence sharing because it was so concerned about Donald Trump's extrajudicial maritime campaign of bringing death and destruction to people that he claimed, without providing any proof, were Venezuelan drug traffickers heading towards American shores in speedboats. So these tensions between the UK and Britain have a long and even recent history. And I just want to come back, James, to MAGA and Donald Trump's problem with his core influencers. Tucker Carlson, the former Fox News host and now podcaster, who was in the White House only last week consulting with President Trump, is furious about this war on Iran and told an ABC reporter by phone over the weekend that he considers it absolutely disgusting and evil. That is the scale of the difficulty Donald Trump is waiting.
When you listen carefully to that exchange, the most important moment isn't actually the argument about whether the strike was justified. It's the moment when the conversation turns to something far more basic. What exactly is the plan from here? Because once military action begins, that question becomes unavoidable. And throughout this discussion, you can hear how difficult it is for anyone involved to give a clear answer. The explanation offered by the White House is relatively straightforward. The action is framed as necessary to prevent Iran from developing nuclear capabilities and to reduce the threat posed by what American officials describe as a hostile regime. But as the conversation shows, the difficulty doesn't lie in explaining why the action happened. The difficulty lies in explaining what happens next. And that distinction matters. History has repeatedly shown that the opening phase of a conflict, the decision to strike, the initial military objectives, is often the most clearly defined part. What follows afterwards tends to be far more uncertain. What political structure replaces the leadership that has just been targeted? Who maintains stability inside the country during that transition? In what role, if any, does the United States then play in shaping what comes next? Those are not theoretical questions. They are the same questions that have surfaced in almost every major intervention debate over the last several decades. And they are precisely the questions that James O'Brien keeps returning to in this interview. Because when the discussion turns to the future of Iran, the answers begin to move away from concrete planning and toward broader expectations, the idea that internal political forces within the country will ultimately determine what happens next. That may be true, but it also means acknowledging something important. The outcome is largely outside the control of the people who initiated the action. The conversation also points to another layer of political complexity that could become significant domestically in the United States. For years, one of the central themes within Donald Trump's political movement has been the promise to avoid overseas military entanglements, the argument that previous administrations had drawn the country into conflicts that lasted far longer than originally expected. That messaging became a defining feature of the broader America First political identity. Which is why the reaction described in this conversation, particularly from some voices within Trump's own political orbit, could matter politically. When a political movement builds itself around a clear principle, any decision that appears to move in the opposite direction naturally raises questions among supporters as well as critics. And that tension is something the interview highlights repeatedly, not through dramatic claims or speculation, but through something much simpler: uncertainty about whether there is a clearly defined endpoint to the policy itself. And that brings the discussion back to the question that quietly frames the entire exchange. Not just why the conflict began, but how anyone expects it to end. Because the most difficult decisions in foreign policy are rarely the ones that start a conflict. They are the ones that determine what comes after. And as this conversation shows, that part of the story is often the hardest to explain. Let me know what you think about this discussion. Do you think the concerns raised here are valid, or do you see the situation differently? Share your perspective in the comments below. I always read through them. And if you found this analysis useful, consider subscribing to the Public Cross Exam for more careful, evidence-based breakdowns of major political conversations. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.